and welcome to Toon Travel, the show where we travel through time and talk about cartoons. I'm Paul Sebert.
And I'm Faith Casto.
All right, and since this is our inaugural episode, I think we should introduce ourselves. My name's Paul, my pronouns are he, him, and I am going back to school at Marshall University after a long career in journalism. You may remember my Dining in the Tri-State column in the Herald-Dispatch. And also, I speak at a number of conventions in the area, including SubasiCon, KazaCon, and MatsuriCon, on a variety of topics. And why don't you introduce yourself, Faith?
I'm Faith. I am a freshman nursing major with a minor in journalism and not communications, psychology. I don't know.
All right. Now, Faith, how do you feel having traveled to time for the first time? Because I'm noticing some unexpected side effects.
It's really interesting, I will say that. I'm feeling pretty good right now. I don't know where exactly we're at or what, but...
Yeah, well, I know you're trying to be polite about this, and the viewers at home can't see this, but I'm pretty sure I've been turned into a giant squirrel.
It does look to be that way.
Yeah, thankfully, Marshall University is covered in squirrels, so I don't think I'm going to be sticking out that much.
Yeah, I think you'll be just fine as long as you figure out how to act like a squirrel.
All right. Now, just out of curiosity, what would you say is your first memory of watching cartoons?
I would say my first memory of watching cartoons would probably be, like, Tom and Jerry, like the older cartoons like that.
I see. Yeah, I had a similar experience. When I was a kid, WSAZ would air reruns of Rocky and Bullwinkle at like 6 in the morning before the regular cartoons came on, and I would watch it at my grandmother's house in Richwood. And it was very frustrating because every episode ended on a cliffhanger. And since we didn't get WSAZ back in Lewisburg, I would not see the resolution, at least not until Nickelodeon picked up the show many years later.
That's really interesting.
And do you have a favorite cartoon of all time?
Honestly, I really like Courage the Cowardly Dog. That one was one of my favorites as a kid. I know a lot of people my age admitted that they were scared of it when they were kids, but I never was.
Oh, that's a good one. It's hard to tell for me. I mean, Batman in the Animated Series is a favorite. I really like Gravity Falls. There's also going to be a place in my heart for Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
Oh, yeah.
So, have you ever seen the movie Ghostbusters?
I have. I'm not familiar with all of them, of course, but I used to watch, like, the movies when they first came out.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I am a big fan of them. Now, to give you an idea how big a phenomenon Ghostbusters was, not only was there the movie, not only was there the soundtrack, but there was a breakfast cereal.
There was there?
Yes, it had a fruit-flavored O's that were shaped like the nose sign in Marshmallow Ghosts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Ralston, the company that used to make Chex, sold it, and usually you have a breakfast cereal based on a movie or a cartoon that's on the shelf for like 1 year. This sold for about 6 years.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
And then there was a beverage.
There was?
Yes, it was called High C Ecto Cooler. They launched it in 1989 to tie into Ghostbusters 2. Thing was on the shelves until 2001.
Huh, and that was like, I would say blue or green, something like that?
It was Nickelodeon Slime Green, and it was tangerine flavored, and it was delicious.
What an interesting combination. It's a green drink, but it's an orange flavor.
Yeah, well, maybe they weren't using ripe tangerines.
Maybe not.
All right, now we have gone back to 1986. The Chicago Bears have done the Super Bowl Shuffle. They sung and danced all their way to the championship. There is a trend of nationwide obsession with Australian culture, thanks to Crocodile Dundee. And there were not one, but 2 Ghostbusters cartoons.
Yeah.
All right, now, to give you an idea of just where we're at, the movie Ghostbusters was released in 1984 and had a theatrical gross of $364 worldwide. It was the second grossing hit of the year. And can you guess what movie was ahead of it?
We're in 1984, right?
Yeah.
Oh, would it be Scream?
Oh, that's 1994.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
actually, that may be 96 or 97, but actually it was Beverly Hills Cop starring Eddie Murphy. It made
Huh.
him like the biggest box office draw in the country. But it was a big hit on cable. It was a big hit on VHS, and a lot of children, myself included, discovered it that way. Of course, it had that iconic theme song by Ray Parker Jr., and it was so big that, of course, a Saturday morning cartoon was produced to tie into it. And in fact, you could say there were two cartoons. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Real Ghostbusters. This was a joint production of Columbia Television and DIC. And this was at a time when Columbia was owned by Coca-Cola.
Huh.
Yeah. And so this was one of the few programs that was distributed by Coca-Cola Television and the other big one, cartoon-wise, there were some live-action ones like Punky Brewster, but the other one, cartoon-wise, was Dino Saucers, which was about anthropomorphic dinosaurs from outer space.
That makes sense, honestly, from the title.
Yes. One of those things that just never caught on for some reason, but I hear it was big in Brazil. Anyway, this show, DIC worked with a lot of Japanese animation studios, including TMS Toy Animation, and I believe this is a South Korean studio, Wang Films. And they had a reputation for, at this time, putting together shows that looked really well done compared to the other animation of the early to mid 80s. They had a lot of hits, including Inspector Gadget, Heathcliff and the Cadillac Cats, and The Littles. And this was one of their bigger budget productions. And it shows with the voice cast, which includes Lorenzo Music as Peter Venkman. He was the voice of Garfield for many years. Also,
Oh, yeah.
also Tubby on the Gummy Bears. And in the 70s, he was the co-star of a sitcom called Rhoda. Interesting enough, the voice actors were told not to do imitations of the actors from the movies, but he was replaced in the later seasons by Dave Coulier, who was the star of Full House. He was
Okay.
Yeah. And the producers apparently changed their minds, and they wanted someone to sound more like Bill Murray. And then you got Ray Stantz and Slimer were both voiced by Frank Welker, who is most famous for doing the voice of Scooby-Doo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he did Scooby-Doo now. He wasn't the original voice, but he was the original voice of Fred Jones, and he still voices him today.
Yeah, I thought he sounded familiar when I was watching that.
Right. He was also Megatron in the original Transformers. Then you got Egon, voiced by Maurice LaMarr of Pinky and the Brain fame. He voices the Brain. And it's kind of interesting because, again, the actors were told not to imitate the movie cast, but he is very clearly doing an impression of Harold Ramis. While, Frank Welker, he is not trying to do Dan Aykroyd at all.
Yeah.
Now, then you got Winston Zedmore, voiced by Arsenio Hall, who was in the movie Coming into America and would later have a very successful late-night talk show. And because he was busy doing the talk show, he had to leave. In the later seasons, he was replaced by Buster Jones. The show ran for 7 seasons, 6 on ABC, and 1 in syndication. So at the peak of its popularity, the show was airing new episodes 6 days a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And 140 episodes were made. Now, let me tell you why that is a significant number. At the time, the average order for a season of a Saturday morning cartoon was 13 episodes.
That's honestly a big number compared to 13.
Yeah. Now, for a syndicated cartoon, the average order was 65 episodes. And do you know why that was?
I don't.
All right. Well, the logic was that you could air new episodes 5 days a week for 4 months, and every quarter they would move things around and change the schedule as sees fit.
That makes sense, honestly.
So it's kind of interesting looking at some of these shows from the era because you have very successful shows that only ran for 65 episodes because for whatever reason, Disney in particular didn't want to produce more. And you have shows that absolutely failed that only went for 65 episodes, which seems like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing 65 episodes, you'd think it'd be a little more popular, but I suppose that's not the case for everything.
Now, during the show's fourth season, it was retooled. It was expanded to an hour, and it was retooled so that you got shorts starring Slimer, and the show was named Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters. And if you put all the Slimer segments together, you got enough for about 13 half hours.
Wow.
All right. Now, there was also a Real Ghostbusters comic book from Now that ran for 28 issues, followed by a second series that only ran for 5 issues. Slimer got his own comic book. It ran for 19 issues. And there was an adaptation of the movie Ghostbusters 2 in comic book format, drawn in the style of the cartoon, called The Real Ghostbusters, starring in Ghostbusters 2.
Huh.
Now, anyway, the show also in 1997 received a sequel series called Extreme Ghostbusters. So that may be something we could do on a future episode.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right. So let's talk about the episode here, When Halloween Was Forever. This is Season 1, Episode 8, and it was written by J. Michael Straczynski. Those of you who don't have a time machine can go watch it on YouTube. And JMS, as he is called, is very famous because he created a television series in the 90s called Babylon 5 that was very successful, though it kind of fell on the wayside. People don't seem to talk much about it these days.
Yeah, I actually haven't heard a bunch about that, if anything at all.
Yeah, he also had a very well-received run on the Spider-Man comic books and is acclaimed for popularizing the books in the early 2000s. If you read a Spider-Man comic in the 90s, they were a big mess. There was this company-wide crossover called the Clone Saga that nearly killed Marvel Comics, but that'll be a story for another day. But our episode opens up with a news reporter on the Ghostbusters busting some ghosts. It's close to Halloween, and the reporter observes the number of hauntings is increasing as Halloween approaches. Back at HQ, Ray speculates the same thing, and Egon has an idea, but he doesn't want to talk about it. We get some comedy where Peter threatens to tell Slimer there's a cupcake in Egon's sock, and Egon speculates that the increase in spectral activity began when some ruins from 7th century Ireland were taken to the museum. And Ray says that's where Halloween began. And Egon gets a little revenge on Peter by telling Slimer there's a lollipop in Peter's sock. We get to the museum where 2 goblins draw an infinity symbol on this strange coffin, and it bursts open, and out comes Samhain, the evil ghost of Halloween. And we get this big musical montage where a giant clock face turns into a monster, a gargoyle comes to life, and some kids are bobbing for apples at a Halloween party, but they turn out to be monster apples. They're all scared. We see the goblins again, and Janine mistakes them for trick-or-treaters. She gets blown over by them, and she yells for the Ghostbusters, who spring into action, and they chase them into the park, but it is filled with ghosts. And this big battle ensues, though it's mostly off-screen. And Sam Hain is rallying the troops. He is floating above the Empire State Building, and there's all kinds of ghosts and ghouls just circling around him. He is raising a full army of the night. Now, Sam Hain also summons Slimer, and he chastises him for living with mortals, and he wants him to join his midnight army, but Slimer refuses because he's a friendly ghost now.
Mm-hmm.
And we get another musical montage of citizens being terrified by ghosts and monsters. It ends with this couple ducking inside a diner for safety, only for it to be filled with skeletons. The Ghostbusters have been chasing ghosts for hours, and Egon speculates that time is slowing down. We see a newscast where the anchor is dressed like a clown, and he reports that night is falling all over Europe, Asia, and South Africa. Interesting, it's just South Africa. And Egon states that if they don't do anything about this, Halloween night will never end. We have a ghost riding on top of a car that appears, and the Ghostbusters try to stop him, only to be thwarted by Sam Hain, who demands they stop bothering his little ones. He does not approve of this ghost busting. And he has vowed to bring the gift of eternal night in eternal Halloween, which, I don't know, that sounds pretty rad.
I mean, yeah, I'm a big fan of the night.
Yeah. So Egon shines a flashlight on Sam Hain, who is weakened by it, and Egon suggests that they turn on the lights in the city. They can weaken him, but there's a power outage. So Egon has to come up with another plan. Sam Hain, once again, asks Slimer to join the Army of the Night, and Slimer sticks his tongue out at him. Egon finds a spotlight and some goblins, who are different ones we saw earlier, try to steal him in this little clown car. And Egon manages to enrage them by calling them zone dweebies, which is an insult I've never heard before.
Definitely not.
And meanwhile, the Ghostbusters are climbing up the Empire State Building, and they are just blasting ghosts left and right. Once the spotlights are in the place, Egon scares the goblins away by zapping their car. And once at the rooftop, Peter, Ray, and Winston confront Sam Hain and his army of ghosts. Sam Hain is holding Slimer hostage, and Ray manages to motivate Slimer to slip out of Sam Hain's grip by offering him pizza. Egon fires up the generators, which shines the spotlights on Sam Hain, and weakens him just long enough for Ray, Peter, and Winston to trap him. And we go back to the fire station, where the Ghostbusters are looking inside the containment unit, where they've got all the ghosts they've caught. And Sam Hain is just patiently waiting inside there. And Egon speculates that he's waiting a chance to return. After all, he has waited for thousands of years. And suddenly a pumpkin appears, and it's just Janine and Slimer pulling the prank with a jack-o'-lantern. And they get back Janine by tickling her, which seems to be an HR violation, at least these days.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And that's the end of the episode. Now, a couple of interesting notes I found out. Sam Hain would return for a sequel episode called Halloween 2.5. And this is notable because this show had very few recurring bad guys. And when they bust a ghost, they get it taken care of. The music was featured during those montages was a song called Midnight Action by a pop group called Tahiti. And 10 songs by Tahiti's were featured on a Real Ghostbusters soundtrack that was released in 1986. And additional music was done by Chaim Saban, the man who brought Mighty Morphin Power Rangers to America.
Oh, yeah.
And in 2023, Sam Hain was added to the video game Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed as the boss of a DLC story campaign.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so Sam Hain, he's still out there. He's still causing trouble for the Ghostbusters.
Yep, I mean, I would too if I got locked up for thousands of years.
Yeah. So what did you think of this episode? Do you think it was a pretty good representation of the Ghostbusters franchise?
Honestly, I would say so, yeah. It was one of the ones that I was like, yeah, this gives the vibes of, like, the Ghostbusters that I'm, like, familiar with compared to, like, the other one that we looked at.
All right. Well, let's talk about that other one that we saw where we were time traveling. And the story of this one actually starts in 1975 with The Ghostbusters, which was a live-action comedy starring Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch, who were famous for a show called F Troop in the 60s as a pair of bumbling paranormal investigators. It also starred Bob Barnes, who got the part because he owned a gorilla suit. He played Tracy, and he was credited as Tracy the Gorilla's handler in the show's credits. Tracy was billed as himself. So actually, Tracy the Gorilla got fan mail.
That's pretty epic, honestly.
Yeah. The show would run for only one season of 15 episodes on CBS, and the ratings were good, but Filmation decided to put its resources behind its number one show, the Shazam ISIS Hour. And Filmation is a company that dates back to the 1960s. They're mostly known for their animation. They brought Archie to television. They did a series called The New Adventures of Superman. They did a Star Trek cartoon. And of course, they ran very high in the 80s with Masters of the Universe. And unfortunately, this show, it got good ratings, but not enough to get a second season because Filmation decided to focus on the Shazam ISIS Hour, which was based on the DC Comics character Shazam. And that was another live-action production. And yeah, if you wanted to see what superheroes on a 70s TV Saturday morning budget looked like, you'd have to watch that show. While the movie Ghostbusters is in pre-production, Filmation ordered a cease and desist letter because to Columbia Pictures over the use of the name. The issue was settled out of court with Columbia Pictures paying over $600,000 and 1% of the box office gross to use the name because it was too late in the film's production to change the name. They just thought it was going to be cheaper to pay Filmation the rights.
Yeah, I would say it'd be cheaper, honestly.
Filmation head Lou Scheimer claims that Columbia used some shady accounting tricks to get out of paying them a portion of the profits. Remember when I said that Filmation was running high during the 1980s? They had a pretty tumultuous downfall. Some of it was stuff outside of their control, and some of it was some kind of harebrained ideas on Lou Scheimer's part.
Oh, yeah.
Because he wanted to get into theatrical animation. And he had this idea of doing sequels to fairy tales, specifically fairy tales that Disney had turned into animated movies. So while this show was in pre-production, they were also working on a movie called Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night. Have you heard of that one?
I have not, actually.
Well, it is a sequel to Pinocchio, but not the Disney version. And Disney actually tried to take them to court to keep it out of theaters. Court ruled that the film was significantly different enough from the Disney version that it stood its own merits, so it was legal. But it was one big problem. It was basically the sequel to a movie that didn't exist.
Yeah, I would say that'd be a big problem, honestly.
Yeah, we had this weird trend in the 80s of sequels to movies that didn't exist. Exterminator 2, Surf 2, Leonard Part 6, Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night. None of them did very well for some reason.
I would probably say it's because they weren't exactly sequels. They were kind of just their own thing.
So Lou Scheimer wanted to license the rights to the Ghostbusters movie from Columbia, a Coca-Cola subsidiary. At this time, because of various mergers, Filmation was owned by Westinghouse, which I guess it kind of makes sense. Filmation makes television. Westinghouse makes televisions.
Yep.
And they said, no, we have Ghostbusters at home. So they decided to make a sequel to the 1975 series, even though, you know, the kids that watched the 1975 series at this point would be college-aged.
I mean, maybe they could have, like, put a twist on it that would make the said college kids be intrigued by it, but...
Well, this is the sequel. This follows the sons of the original Ghostbusters, and by original, I mean the 1975 versions. It premiered on September 8th, 1986, so it actually predates the Real Ghostbusters by just about 5 days. And it had some star-making, at least notable voice talent. Jake Kong Jr. was voiced by Pat Freely, who did Krang in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Eddie Spencer Jr. was voiced by Peter Cullen, who is most famous as the voice of Optimus Prime. And Tracy the Gorilla was voiced by Lou Scheimer himself, so he wasn't just a television producer, he was a voice actor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and, you know, I mean... who else are you going to get? Frank Welker, the master of animal noises, is on the other Ghostbusters show.
Yeah.
And she's not featured in this episode, but Susan Blue, who's the voice of Arcee in the original Transformers, was the voice of a character named Futura, the Ghostbuster of the Future, who is my favorite character because she is a purple-skinned time traveler.
Huh.
Yeah. People used to think that we'd have flying cars. Filmation thought that people would be purple in the future.
Yeah, that checks out.
She also did the voice of Belfry the Bat, who has a little cameo in this episode.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
And she did the voice of Madame Tutu in this episode. And finally, you have the villain, Prime Evil, voiced by Alan Oppenheimer, who was the voice of Skeletor in He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And as I mentioned before, because the standard run was 65 episodes, the show ran for one season of 65 episodes. There was also a toy line, and these action figures actually look like they're really well made, but the fact they're the wrong Ghostbusters kind of, condemns them to the island of misfit toys along with King Moonracer and the water gun that squirts jelly. This show also has a scandal that could have only have happened in the era of analog media. So in 1989, episodes of the show were released on VHS through Just for Kids, a division of Celebrity Home Entertainment. And as a budget-cutting measure, rather than get new blank tapes, a subcontractor used old cassettes that had content on them and just recorded over them. And sometimes you would see a little bit of what was left over on the original recording. And some unlucky kids, and picture this, it's 1989, your grandmother has given you a VHS of the wrong Ghostbusters cartoon, you're watching this, and right after the end credits come off, they got hardcore pornography.
Oh.
Yes, it was a big scandal, and there was a huge recall of VHS tapes, and they had to replace them.
Yeah, I would hope so, honestly. I can't imagine what that was like.
Right. So because we watched the 8th episode of the Real Ghostbusters, I decided that we'd watch the 8th episode of this show just to see where they were after 8 episodes. This is Wacky Wax Museum, and it was written by Robbie Gorin, who worked on a 60 show called Laugh In. He also wrote a lot of cartoons, including episodes of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and Fat Albert, which is a show that we are not going to be revisiting for this show because of its very problematic creator.
Oh, man.
All right. So the episode begins with Brat-a-Rat, who is this weird rat, seahorse flying thing. I do not like him spying on the Ghostbusters. And a man arrives in a fancy car, and he is bringing a message from Madame Tutu, the owner of a famous wax museum in Paris. They receive the letter saying that Jake and Eddie are going to be honored with statues and that she would like them to attend. This Rube Goldberg voice puts a beret on Tracy the Gorilla's head, and we are informed that Tracy the Gorilla speaks French perfectly. At least he can say merci beaucoup. The Ghostbusters decide to get into uniform, and this leads to a 2-minute sequence where they get on this Rube Goldberg device, they get sucked into the ghost dimension, these machines dress them, and this was like their version of He-Man powering up or Usagi turning into Sailor Moon. And
yeah, I don't know. When I was watching this myself, it kind of reminded me of like one of the original Care Bears movies. I don't know why, but I think it was like the scene where like it's like the Care Bears are like little kids at this point and they're like getting taken care of. I don't know. It was interesting.
That's an interesting thing. Well, the thing is, this sequence was used in almost every episode, so it actually looks a lot better in terms of animation. The rest of the thing, it's again like a magical girl transformation they spent a good bit of the anime's budget on.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's like they don't get powers or anything when they put on their uniforms. Why do they go to so much trouble?
I mean, maybe they want to look cool doing it.
All right. So they go downstairs, get in the ghost buggy, which has a ghost into it and can talk and fly, and they head off to France. And we go back to the ghost dimension, and Primeval is just furious about this turn of events, and he calls for his most evildoers. A group of flying creatures called the Tooth Scaries eat their way into Primeval's lair and offer their services. Primeval refuses because he says that they can't decide whether they want to be good or bad. So he is sent for Haunter, whose official title is the Civilized Haunter of Haunted Prey. He is a British safari guy ghost, and I guess he shoots ghost elephants or something?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, he could hunt the most dangerous game, which would be other ghosts.
Yeah.
And he is associated by Mysteria, the Mistress of the Mists, who is a mist creature who's also a sexy vampire woman who is also a ghost. I noticed, I did a little research on the wiki for the show. All the ghosts are like too many things.
Yeah, I noticed that. Also, why is he purple? The safari guy.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he's from the future, like Futura.
Possibly.
But yeah, other ghosts on the show include Scared Stiff, who is a skeleton robot ghost who is also a coward, and Fangster, who is a werewolf ghost from the future. And I don't know, this show sort of reminds me of that Gremlins 2 sketch from Key and Peele, where everyone gets to make a gremlin. I'm just picturing Lou Scheimer and a group of employees at Filmation, and they're like, everyone gets to make a ghost. First idea.
Vampire.
Whatever comes. Yeah. And so anyway, Mysteria and Haunter don't like each other, which is understandable because Haunter is a colonialist and probably racist. And they go to France. Madame Tutu is showing them around the Wax Museum, and there's a little joke where she mistakes the statue of Jake for the real thing and vice versa. And Tracy the gorilla mistakes a wax banana from his statue for the real thing, and there are some shenanigans. The ghosts arrive, and Haunter summons a lightning bolt, and it just mildly inconveniences our heroes. In fact, Madame Tutu just thinks there's an electrical short. Jake sneezes because he's allergic to ghosts, which that seems to be sort of a career setback if you're a Ghostbuster. I wouldn't want to be a dog catcher if I was allergic to dogs.
Definitely not. Although I feel like it could definitely be a good thing as well. Like, oh, I'm allergic to ghosts. I sneeze, so there must be one around.
Right. So Mysteria gets this crystal ball. She holds it up to the sun outside of a window. She tries melting the Ghostbuster statues, and she does a pretty good job of messing them up. But Haunter tries to help her, and this backfires, and they get zapped and sent back through the ghost dimension through no effort on our heroes' parts, which seems to be a trend in this show. And Primeval just throws a fit, and we find out the reason that he is so mad is because the Ghostbusters are in the Hall of Heroes, and he's not in the Hall of Villains, which that seems fair. The Tooth Scaries once again offered their services, while Madame Tutu fixes the Ghostbusters statue and once again mistakes Jack for his wax doppelganger. We get some comedy as Tracy the Gorilla switches the heads on the statues. And the Tooth Scaries show up, they burrow into the museum and bring a Frankenstein statue to life. The Tooth Scaries kidnap Madame Tutu while the Ghostbusters deal with Frankenstein. And Tracy single-handedly saves the day by freezing the Frankenstein statue using a block of ice and a fan. So once again, our heroes really haven't done much. And the Tooth Scaries, they aren't messing around. They tell Madame Tutu she has to make a statue of Primeval or else they're going to eat the Eiffel Tower. And
wow.
Yes. The stakes have been raised. So the Ghostbusters show up, and Jake tricks the Tooth Scaries into eating a gun called the Dematerializer, which sends them back to the ghost dimension. I don't know why he didn't actually use his weapon, but...
yeah, I don't know. And they ate it?
Yeah, they just gobbled it all down. So they have to get themselves another dematerializer. But anyway, so the days save, the statues are unveiled. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed the Hall of Heroes, but it's kind of peculiar because they have a superhero statue, they have a Viking, they have a cowboy, they have Sherlock Holmes, and they have the Ghostbusters. So I'm not sure how Madame Tutu is laying this thing out.
I don't know if she really has a pattern or not. I mean, I know she had like the presidents in one room.
Yeah. So and the big surprise is that they have a statue of the Ghost Buggy in the Hall of Heroes with the Ghostbusters, and I don't know if the statue's made of wax like the other ones, but the Ghost Buggy is happy, and that is the end of the episode, or so we think. Now, Filmation would frequently end their shows with a little PSA to tell our viewers what lesson we learned from this week's episode. And usually it's tangentially related to the plot of these storylines. So you would watch an episode of He-Man and he would be like, well, we thought Manny Faces was a bad guy because he looked like a monster, but he turned like he was a good guy. So don't judge people by their cover. Or don't judge a book by its cover. But this one we learn, apparently the lesson of this episode is to the importance of eating a balanced diet. And
All right.
yeah, and it ends with Tracy the Gorilla juggling bananas.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and that is the end of our episode. So what did you think of Filmation's Ghostbusters?
Honestly, I thought it was really interesting. I mean, I liked the episode. Although I will say that the accents being portrayed were kind of interesting. I don't know. I know the British guy, it didn't sound very British to me.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I found Susan Blue's accent of Madame Tutu a little more distracting.
Yeah, it was something, all right. I don't know if it was very accurate or not, but I mean, it seemed like the stereotypical kind of French accent to me.
Yeah. Well, this show, again, it only ran for one season. It did not do very well, and this was one of the many chinks in Filmation's armor that brought the studio down. This was their next to last television production. The other one was Brave Star, which that may be a future episode.
All right.
Well, I think we have just about recapped these shows, so I'm thinking next time we should go to slightly into the future, into the 90s. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect. Maybe next time you can figure out how to get back to normal.
Well, maybe I will have to unsquirrel myself. Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you for tuning in to Toon Travel. I'm Paul Sebert, and you have a great day.
Yep.